A háború blokkolja az európai és a magyar gazdaság növekedését. 185 milliárd eurót öltek bele ebbe a reménytelen háborúba.
In the heart of Europe, an unprecedented tension is simmering, a political fault line cracking under the weight of national interest, institutional loyalty, and the very meaning of membership in the European Union. At its focal point is Viktor Orbán, Hungary's Prime Minister, and his increasingly restless relationship with Brussels. If you're watching this channel, EU Politics, then you're tuning in to a moment that could define the bloc's future. So now is the time. Subscribe to EU Politics so you don't miss what comes next. Orbán's posture has shifted from merely skeptical to actively confrontational. In recent days, several news reports have unfolded that illustrate just how bolder his approach has become. One headline hit on the 4th of November 2025. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly called on Hungary to lift its veto blocking Ukraine's bid to join the European Union, condemning the Hungarian position as specific support for Vladimir Putin. And on the very same day, another explosive development surfaced. A scandal in Brussels suggesting that Hungarian intelligence services had run a spy network targeting the European institutions, possibly implicating the Hungarian EU Commissioner. These are not isolated incidents. They are signals that the rules of the game in Europe are shifting. For you watching EU Politics, the implications are far-reaching. From energy policy to defence, from democratic norms to enlargement, the stakes are high. Let's dive into what this means, how we got here, and why it matters. Not just for Hungary or the EU, but for every citizen within the Union and beyond. First, the enlargement crisis. Ukraine has been at the front line of Europe's future for months. The EU declared Ukraine eligible for candidate status, but progress requires unanimity from all member states. That's where Hungary stands as a bottleneck. At the Euronews EU Enlargement Summit on the 4th of November, key leaders demanded Hungary remove its veto over Ukraine's EU bid. Zelensky told Hungarian obstructiveness sends a message of support to Russia. Why does this matter? Because enlargement isn't just about new flags joining Brussels. It's about the collective security architecture of Europe, about who sets the rules and who you ask when the next crisis hits. Orban has framed his veto not as obstruction, but as defence. He claims Ukraine's membership would flood Hungary with economic burdens, cheap labour, and threaten Hungarian farmers and sovereignty. It's a narrative that taps into domestic fear, national interest, and the long-held Hungarian tradition of resistance to external imposition. Meanwhile, the EU finds itself in a bind. Let one member kill the process and risk the Union's credibility, or push ahead without unanimity and risk deepening the division. Second, the espionage scandal in Brussels. According to reporting from El País, Belgian and German investigators are probing whether Hungarian intelligence recruited agents among EU institutions, possibly under diplomatic cover, to access sensitive documents, in one instance reportedly involving the Hungarian EU Commissioner. The Hungarian government has denied the allegations, but the investigation alone presents a symbol. The trust underlying the European institutions is under strain when one member state is making headlines as an alleged espionage operator within the Union's own institutions. For an organisation that prizes transparency, mutual accountability and rule-based cooperation, this moment challenges the very foundations. Third, the cumulative effect this has on the EU's internal cohesion. Membership of the Union has always been based on a set of shared values: democracy, rule of law, human rights, and common policies on trade, security, and enlargement. But when a member state openly diverges from the consensus in such fundamental arenas, the question arises: is the Union still a union? Or is it now a loose federation of states that brush against each other but no longer bind each other? Orbán's Hungary exemplifies a new model: membership without full alignment, sovereignty prioritized over supranational coordination, national strategy rather than collective discipline. For EU watchers and for you watching EU Politics, this is a turning point. The impact: slower decision-making, increased vetoes, policy stalemates, and potentially a slowdown in European integration. Let's turn to why this matters in everyday terms. Energy, for example. While specific recent articles haven't detailed a new energy deal in Hungary, the pattern is clear. Hungary has long relied on Russian gas and oil to power its economy. It has resisted full alignment with EU sanctions in the way other states have. That means when the EU tries to impose a unified external energy policy conflicting with national interest, the cracks show. You might think this is remote until your bills go up, or strategic infrastructure delays affect your region. The Union's ability to act as one bloc is partly predicated on shared commitments. When one member chooses otherwise, unpredictability rises. Democracy and rule of law matter too. If Hungary's media control increases, if independent NGOs are suppressed, if institutions crumble under national pressure, the ripple effect can spread. The European Commission's mechanisms for enforcing standards may falter if the will to act wavers. The result? Weakening democratic norms across the continent. Some countries might follow the model, believing divergence can be tolerated. For you, the viewer, what changes is the concept of what membership means. Is it simply access to the market, or a commitment to a set of rules you abide by? And politically, election cycles in Hungary matter for the EU more than ever. Orban is facing arguably his toughest battle yet in the 2026 parliamentary election. Opposition forces, shifting demographics, economic strains, all add pressure. Meanwhile, by positioning this external narrative, veto power, espionage allegations, resisting Brussels, he cultivates a nationalist base while influencing the Union's direction. The outcome will not just decide Hungary's government, it will signpost whether the Hungarian path is exceptional or emulated. So what are the scenarios ahead for the European Union? One possibility is enforcement. The EU could activate mechanisms like Article 7, freeze cohesion funds, or enforce stricter monitoring to penalise divergence. That might coerce Hungary back into alignment, but at a cost. An alienated member, possible backlash, and precedent of punishment as policy. Another path is accommodation. The Union might allow more flexibility, tolerate varied pace of integration, accept opt-outs in certain domain, but then risk the gradual hollowing of the shared architecture. For you as a citizen of Europe or an observer of European politics, the outcome matters. It affects whether Europe remains a unified actor on the world stage, whether it can negotiate from strength with Russia, the US, China, or whether it fractures into smaller blocs, each with its own agenda. Trade agreements, security alliances, energy infrastructure, all these are grounded in the assumption of unity. A fractured Europe could mean weaker global influence, slower growth, less strategic independence. Let's reflect for a moment on how we got here. The wars, the energy shocks, the populist wave, globalization backlash, all provided a context for leaders like Orban to argue that national interest must come first. The EU's model of shared sovereignty has been strained. For years, the Hungarian government has gradually eroded independent media, reshaped constitutional rules, and amassed power internally, making external resistance easier. Today's clash is an external expression of that inward trajectory, but it doesn't mean there is no hope. If the EU can innovate its decision-making, if it can strengthen its institutions, if it can reaffirm the benefits of membership not just in rhetoric but in practice, then the divergence might be contained. If Hungary pulls back, or if the Union shows adaptive resilience, the model might evolve but survive. For the viewers of EU politics, that's the story worth following. So again, if you want in-depth coverage of what happens next, subscribe to EU Politics. As we approach the final phase of our discussion, the key questions you should carry with you are: will Hungary's veto and divergence model become a blueprint for others? Can the European Union continue to act when member states block consensus on decisions crucial to enlargement, sanctions, and foreign policy? Will the Union evolve into a less binding, more flexible entity? And if so, at what cost? And ultimately, what kind of Europe will we inhabit? A union defined by shared rules, or a loose federation of national first states? The rest of Europe is watching Hungary. The East is watching the West. The global partners are watching the bloc, and you, at home, should too. Because Europe's future won't just be shaped in Brussels, it will be echoed in your economy, your politics, and your identity. Ultimately, this story is not just about one man, one country, or one union. It is about the nature of sovereignty and cooperation in a rapidly changing world. Viktor Orbán's challenge is more than national politics. It is a test for the European project itself. Thank you for watching. I hope this episode of EU Politics has given you clarity on what's at stake. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Hungary's path is a necessary correction or a dangerous departure? And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to EU Politics for the next chapter in this unfolding drama.